My name is Debbie. I am one of the co-founders of the Art and Science of Joy. I am here with my partner, Andrew, who's from Finland, the happiest country in the world. And we are thrilled to have you here, want to welcome you and let you know a little bit about the Art and Science of Joy, and then we'll move on from there. Andrew and I started this a number of years ago after just brainstorming an idea that we need more joy in the world. We are researchers by background, careers, and decided we would use our research hats to figure out a little bit about what it is that brings us joy, how we get there, and what the other people around the world feel about it. So we developed a recipe with our research and our findings, all the data we have, all the data we could find. And that recipe includes well-being, which we're going to talk about today, belonging, positive impact, and fun. A lot of ingredients within that recipe. And from this very beginning of our start of this organization called the Art and Science of Joy, we then hit upon something we thought we could share with the world, and that was our Year of Joy. And I'm going to let Andrew tell you a little bit about the Year of Joy.
Well, thank you, Debbie. And I couldn't talk about the Year of Joy without mentioning Debbie. I remember being at a conference of CEOs in Miami, I think 2 years ago, almost a year and a half ago now, when Debbie just mentioned during our speech that we're going to do a Year of Joy. And I sort of looked at her and said, okay. And so the idea was put out there, the intention was put out there that we're going to do this. 3 months later, we had a PowerPoint. Another 3 months later, we had 30 odd partners in the insights and research space saying, yes, we're going to support you doing this. 9 months later, or another 3 months, we had the platform. And come the following January, we were launched with the Year of Joy, which is now 10 months into the year. So an amazing journey. And I'm forever grateful for Debbie for putting the intention out there, the power of intention in practice. If you say it, it can come true, which is very joyful. So for 10 months now, each week, we've had an expert come on to talk to us about what various joy superpowers under those 4 ingredients that Debbie mentioned. And I'm so happy today that we have 4 wonderful experts in various aspects of your life, which can bring you more joy and improve your emotional well-being, which we're going to talk about today. So thank you, everybody, for coming on today. And thank you to our panelists, especially for joining us. And now back to Debbie to introduce our amazing guests today.
Thank you, Andrew. I could go on and on about the Art and Science of Joy and the Year of Joy, as you can imagine. But it's without all of the members, community members who are on here, as well as our wonderful experts who volunteer their time. Without them, this would not happen. So I want to thank all of you. So here we go. Let me tell you a little bit about who's on our panel, and then we'll get started. First, we have Victor. Victor Perton is a founder and chief optimism officer of the Center of Optimism. Victor is the author of Optimism, the How and Why. The Center for Optimism is a think tank dedicated to asking people what makes you optimistic. And yes, he's asked me that a couple times. Victor's life experience includes stints as commissioner to the Americas, 18 years a parliamentarian, practice as a barrister, mediator, arbitrator, businessman, and board service. Victor was also a senior engagement advisor to the Australian G20 presidency. Welcome, Victor. With us as well, we have Paula. Paula Rosecky, a very good friend of mine, is a longtime market researcher, facilitator, and mindset coach in Seattle. She regularly facilitates community listening sessions and conducts personal and professional development workshops online. Paula received her MBA from RIT through the U.S. Business School in Prague and a bachelor's degree in sociology from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Paula's international and research background has fueled her ability to create spaces of empathy and belonging to empower people to be better allies and leaders. Welcome, Paula. We have with us also Heidi Smith. Heidi's a best-selling author, transformation guide, speaker, and Accelerated Evolution Academy master coach and trainer. With a deep passion for guiding her clients towards their natural state of joy, Heidi approaches to make room for joy by helping people let go of limiting beliefs and negative emotions that hold them back from embracing their true selves. Very deep, very impactful. Heidi's best-selling book, Making Friends with the Boogeyman, is packed with her powerful insights and practical strategies for navigating difficult emotions and life challenges. Drawing on her own personal experiences with intense childhood trauma, anxiety, and addiction, Heidi offers readers candid stories and empowering tools to reclaim their personal power and create an extraordinary life full of abundance, peace, love, and joy. We all need that. Welcome, Heidi. And last, but of course not least, my dear friend, Rob. Rob is an astute observer of life and a master storyteller who brings empathy and compassion to the human experience. He is the author of the Tell Me More About That, Solving the Empathy Crisis One Conversation at a Time, which won the Silver Benjamin Franklin Award for Best Self-Help Book of 2022 from the Independent Book Publishers Association. As a thought leader in the role of empathy in marketing and the workplace, he is a contributor to Entrepreneurs Leadership Network and is a frequent keynote speaker on the topic. Welcome, Rob. It's great to have all of you here, all dear friends of ours, as those who I did not know before became dear friends, and Paula and Rob, who I've known for years, have, of course, continued to be good friends. And I'm going to send it over to Andrew to start us off.
Thanks very much, Debbie, for that wonderful introduction to our fabulous experts today. So the state of play, we're basically going to have maybe 3, maybe 4 parts to today's event. First of all, we're going to kick off with an open discussion amongst the panelists. I'll get that going so they can get flowing amongst themselves. I think Paula said it well earlier. They're going to pass the joy ball from one to another and hopefully inspire you with some stories during that. The second part's going to be more about activation, so sharing some good advice and tips on how you can actually start working to improve your own emotional well-being over the coming days, weeks, months, hours, years, whatever time frame it is. Time is relative, so don't stress about time. And then we're going to have a Q&A. So as Debbie said, put any questions you have in the chat or in the Q&A button, if that even works. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It's a surprise. But definitely the chat works, so we know that. And then finally, anybody hangs around, we'll go open mic and listen to everybody else talk about their joy and their emotional well-being. So that's the order of play. So I'm going to start the conversation going here, Victor, with you, and ask you the very simple question, deceptively simple. What is the relationship between emotional well-being and joy?
Well, as you can imagine, my enemies call me that optimism man, and I give myself the label of radical optimist. So I come at this through the prism of optimism. And right from the beginning of the year, when you asked me to join you in the superpowers of optimism, it occurred to me that the optimist experiences more joy, and the joyful are more likely to be optimistic. So just a tiny story. The other morning, I had to drive my daughter to rowing at 5:30 in the morning. And it's springtime here, so the sun started to rise at about 6:30, and the air was still. And I walked back into my garden, and it was like an Arabian garden of rose fragrance. The roses are blooming, and I just stopped and just reveled in that. And so when I think about, the topic you want, that link between emotional well-being and joy, it is about stopping and smelling the roses. It's about going for a walk, and in our case, we have magpies, which have a beautiful song. It's observing the birds, and then in the day-to-day, I'm chairman of leadership, culture and diversity at the second largest water utility in Australia. And one of our philosophies is that we can't solve the well-being question for all our workers, but we can make them better for being at work. So for me, for every individual, it's a work of art. And how do we help people to do that? And you and Debbie and the team this year have helped us to focus on joy. And when I went back to my book and did a word count on joy, even before I'd met you, I had 20 references to joy. So for me, as a radical optimist, as someone who spends my days asking people what makes you optimistic, joy is at the core, and joy is at the core of well-being. And I don't think you can achieve well-being unless you're joyful. And I know Paula's thought about this a lot. Paula, what do you reckon? That connection between well-being and joy, and dare I say it, that optimism that you share.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah. So I like to think of well-being in it's kind of a larger umbrella, right? So what I did today in preparation for this discussion was to take a look at the ways that well-being can be defined, and then think about how joy kind of folds into that. So the World Health Organization defines well-being as a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. And why I think this is important is because as human beings, this definition to me sounds very, very idealistic, right? Like we're all supposed to be completely physically, mentally, and socially, perfect all the time. So I think there's a little flaw in this definition, because I don't believe we can always be at our utmost well-being in all these areas. And so I think it's important to recognize that we're not always going to be in well-being all the time. And being able to recognize that is going to be important, because part of this well-being is understanding our feelings better. And joy, to me, is a feeling that we're trying to cultivate more of. And we can do that on purpose. So I think of joy as being very closely interlocked with well-being, because it's a feeling that we can generate based on the way that we approach life and our thoughts to create the result of well-being. What say you, Heidi? What's your perspective on that?
Thank you, Paula. Yes, I hear what you're saying about that was a very interesting definition. And when I think about emotional well-being, what comes up for me is when we are in right relationship with our emotions. And the way that our physical experience impacts us is that we become vulnerable to the emotions running away with the show. Like the child that, the children give in to every emotion exactly as it's happening, whether it's screaming, and it's like they just let it all go. And this is what happens as adults as well, when we're not getting sleep, when we're not eating, when we're not looking after our needs, our emotional needs. Like this is when the emotions become overwhelming. And so it is a very important piece. And self-care is something that gets set aside so easily. When we're looking after ourselves and taking care of our bodies, then we have some separation from the impact of emotions, so that we actually have an opportunity to discern, okay, is this, how much of this do I want to express in this moment? What's here for me? And you know, I am a strong believer that every emotion is here to serve us. Mm-hmm. And having some separation between who we are as infinite beings and how we feel gives us the freedom to experience our emotions and then set them free, because we are the master of our emotions. It's not the other way around. So that for me is well-being, is that right relationship. And if someone is in a situation where they are not capable of getting into that right relationship, it's time to ask for help. It's time to look to others and learn from others. What are your thoughts on that, Rob?
Yeah, thanks, Heidi. And hi, everybody. Yeah, self-empathy, which I think, Heidi, is kind of what you're talking about in terms of having that self-awareness and understanding where you're coming from and what's going on, is really critical to even attempting emotional well-being and trying to find that kind of balance. And I do, you know, as we said in the sort of promotional materials for this talk, and, you know, we talk about the mental health crisis that's going on, and there's a loneliness epidemic. And there was an article in the Washington Post a couple of days ago, Harvard Grad School of Education making caring common study, finding like young adults, the older part of Gen Z, is actually getting ignored in the mental health crisis that's going on. And so I do want to sort of double down on that statement. Like, you have to be aware of yourself. And if you're not able to transition your emotions yourself, to reach joy, to move from one to the other, there are mental health professionals that are out there, and resources and licensed therapists and psychologists and psychiatrists to help people. And I encourage people to do that and seek that support, because we can't do it all on our own all the time. And as I've posted on social media, I myself have moved in and out of spaces where I've needed the additional support for my own emotional well-being at different times. And it just, you know, it's life. And I think we often get caught up in these definitions, or what, you know, the perfect influencer or celebrity or whoever it is, like what that life is supposed to look like. But that's all manufactured. So it's about having that awareness of where you are today and what you can do, and that self-awareness and that empathy with yourself, like what's going on, as you guys were talking about, what's going on that's causing the emotion that you're having. And so it's self-awareness and self-empathy in order to hopefully migrate your emotions and maybe get to a place of joy, or have that awareness of like, hey, I need to take a minute and appreciate the roses outside my window. Or about an hour ago, 2 red hummingbirds zipped right past my window, and I was like, oh my God, that's so cool. You know, I wish there was a flower outside that they would have, like, you know, hovered around with. But it is those little things that can bring you joy and help sort of elevate a mood, and understanding where you're at and what you need in order to transition.
Great stuff, everybody. I've got a question that came into my mind when I was thinking about this. You know, it's a lot of it is internal, right? The joy that we're talking about, especially, but outside, externally, especially if you look at the media, we've been bombarded with negativity, with negative messages, with crises, depending on. So maybe talk a little bit about the challenge and how to overcome that challenge of finding joy in tough times. You know, if you're feeling that things aren't easy at the moment, maybe Paula or Rob, go for that. Rob, you put your hand.
Go ahead, Rob.
I raised my hand because I've been doing a study for the last few years now called Navigating to New Normal. We've been talking to the same set of adults about how they've been navigating everything. And as one of them, so I'm in the latest cycle right now, and that's what I was doing just before this call. And one of the woman I was talking to yesterday just talked about, you know, all the cataclysmic moments and events that we keep experiencing. And we were talking specifically about what's happening in Israel and with the Palestinians. And take that information and manage it and hold, and then the mom of 3 that I was just talking to now, she's aware, but not going too deep because she needs to manage her own emotions. And so, you have to make that choice for yourself of understanding how the news affects you and how to manage your consumption of it. So the first sort of piece I go to is, you're managing, whether it's social media, whether it's, how deep you go into the newspaper every day or other news sites, so that you don't get overwhelmed with all of the bad news. Because it is, we have been faced with, countless, once in a lifetime events, basically. If you think from the pandemic to, the George Floyd's murder and the protests that happened after that here in the States, if you go to January 6th, and then you go to Russia, and I'm forgetting something else in between those two things, and now Israel, these are massive events that typically weren't happening, and certainly not as much as they have. And so there is this sort of effect that's happening on people. A butterfly effect, as one of the people said. And so we have to be mindful of how those things are weighing on us and how we're processing it, and then taking the time to step out of it and seek the joy.
Yeah, I can offer as well that this idea of how things can accumulate. We all are experiencing some levels of trauma, whether it's collective trauma and our own individual traumas, and that can pile up until we're not, and it may be in our subconscious, and we may not be really thinking about it on a daily basis, but it's down there, right? It's underneath the surface oftentimes. And I think I love what you're saying about really watching what you're consuming, how you're consuming it, how often, and for how long, because that too is just not, it's on the surface and below the surface. And if you can think about as much time as you're consuming, that you're also creating something, whether that is, using your hands or anything that where you find joy in some creativity and allowing your brain to have a break from the consuming. We need to balance out consuming and creating.
Yeah.
And giving, if you want, magic words, right, from Gandhi, be the change you want to see. Mm-hmm. And so when these things are happening and you want peace, you want love, whatever it is that you are craving, that these things are stirring in you, then give that to the people in your life. Give that to yourself. Mm-hmm. And therefore, then you're contributing to the change. You're contributing to the solution rather than fixating on what's wrong.
Right.
Yeah, I love it.
It's a great build on another conversation I was having earlier today with a healer I work with, where there isn't much we can do individually about what's happening in Israel and Gaza. That's a little beyond most of our control, but it is about, I think, Heidi, your point, I'm glad you brought it up, the people that are around you and what you can offer to the people that you do interact with. And so that you are, rather than the dark shadow of the war and the suffering that's going on, focus instead on, as Paula said, the creation and the peace and the wholeness and kindness that you can associate and are kind of the opposite of that. And how do you foster that environment with your own community?
Yeah. Victor, how do you stay optimistic in tough times?
Well, optimism is for the tough times. It's not for the easy times. I always go back to Victor Frankl and Man's Search for Meaning and the addendum he wrote called Tragic Optimism, which said, it doesn't matter whether you're in a concentration camp or, living in the beautiful places we live. Just do your best. And optimism is not a state of the world. It's a state of mind. So we know that there have been wars and there have been crises throughout human history and existence. And so we need to remind people, that things will work out. And yesterday, one of my board members is Jewish. He's very much involved in the Jewish community, family in Israel. And for me, it was just listening to him, and just, how you're feeling, and, letting him speak, and not being, as you know, I am a Pollyanna, but that's not the time for being a Pollyanna. It's to ask the right questions. So for me, what we advise CEOs and the like is, you've got to listen to the news, right? Otherwise you sound like a dunderhead if you don't know what's happening. But if you can restrict it to 15 minutes at the beginning of the day and restrict it to 15 minutes at the end of the day, read the other stuff that's important. And exactly as Paula said, share some good news. Whether it's a client's good news, or, whether it's a piece of some science that people won't have read about otherwise. Each of us here have audiences that are larger than most newspapers, whether we use Twitter or Facebook or LinkedIn or Instagram. And the other day I just did a picture of the rose, and, my rose-scented garden, I literally had hundreds of people clicking like. Dozens of people making comments, and just in that, or, today I'm wearing a Samoan shirt. I said to people I would bring a touch of Samoa back to Port Melbourne. And, the science says if you wear a little bit of yellow, a little bit of orange, people's eyes are going to be drawn to it, and it's going to make them that little bit happy. So at that, at the touch end, it's that little bit of color. And I walk down the street, and there's someone with a beautiful garden. I thank them. As you know, Melbourne is a coffee culture capital. After I've had my coffee, I go to the barista and say that was beautiful, a work of art. I poke my head into the restaurant or cafe kitchen and say, that dish you cooked is beautiful. So that little bit of sharing the stories of happiness, sharing the uplift, I think is central. And it's so easy to do if you can remember. If I can just extend one, but the other day I went into this engineering firm and I had to fill in the screen on security questions. And then nowadays engineering firms make you do an induction before you come in. So the first bit of the induction was, don't write emails or read emails on your phone whilst walking around. So I immediately wrote to the CEO and I said, could you add to that and smile and say hello to everyone?
That's awesome.
Love it.
I can build on what Victor was just saying too. It prompted the thought about spreading joy to other people, and taking a moment. My husband is very good about this. If he sees somebody, he's a stylist and a designer, and so when he sees somebody that looks very stylish or something, he takes a moment to compliment them. And I've started to do that myself, because what I've noticed was how they react to it. Like they're so delighted, because you do put thought in what you're going to wear, and to have somebody say, like, Victor, that's an awesome shirt, and I would love something like that for myself as well. And that brightness, and it makes you feel good. And then in turn, it makes me feel good. And it's those little moments of spreading some kindness through the kindness of a compliment. It's bringing you joy, which then in turn is making me feel better and bringing joy to me because I've made you feel good.
And can I build on that?
Yes.
Well, and I love what you're saying, because basically what we want to try to do more of is help people in any kind of way that we can. Also brings us joy and it brings them joy. And that help can just be looking at someone in the eyes when they did something kind for you, or you had dinner with them, right? Just taking that extra little moment of you seeing truly seeing someone, and someone truly seeing you. And what is so powerful is that we do not always need to be using words either. We can just, pause a little longer when you're thanking someone and just hold that gaze for an extra second or two. That may seem a little uncomfortable, but in that discomfort, that kind of discomfort is the pleasure of being seen and seeing someone else. So
I met Bill Clinton at a relatively intimate dinner. and he looks you in the eye,
Yes.
not looking over your shoulder, not looking for anyone else. For that minute or half minute, you are his entire world. And that's what made him or makes him magical. And all charismatic people in the world have that ability for that instant to make you the center of their world. And, you know, each of you, when I've talked to you on video or the like, you have that amazing capacity.
I'm going to offer one more thing along that line in the same way where it's a little.
As long as you bring Heidi in quickly after that.
Okay. Oh, yes. I'm sorry, Heidi. Did I just jump in on you?
Please.
Come on in, Heidi. Come on in. Just really briefly. So on that same note, I love to hug people for just like a couple of seconds too long, where, you know, you have that moment and they want to pull back. And I purposefully hold just a little bit tighter just for like a second or two. And then I tell them, I'm like, this is just making me feel good. Hopefully it feels good to you too, you know? So with permission, of course, but Heidi,
Yes.
to you.
So what's coming up for me from all of this is being in the present moment. So when we are looking after ourselves, we have the ability to be here and now so that we can connect with one another, so that we can look at each other in the eye, so that we notice when someone has a furrowed brow and we can check in with them. So the gift of looking after ourselves is that it gives us the ability to open up to connection with other human beings. And this is, you know, this is where love comes from. This is where belonging comes from. And, you know, that's like addiction and all of the issues that people are struggling with. They all fester in isolation. And so it's by being in this present moment and being open to connection with others that we get to feel the love and the joy that we all are naturally.
Beautifully said, Heidi. Beautifully said. I'm going to have to stop you there, guys. Like, this conversation could go on together, like all great conversations. It could just go on and inspire us all. But I really want us to get to the tips part, because I'm a tip addict. So I love tips, and I've set our panelists the challenge between them of sharing 12 tips in 20 minutes, and each of them the challenge of sharing 3 tips in 3 minutes. So they're on the clock on this one before they pass the joy ball to the next person. And Victor is up to get the train rolling.
Good. Number 1, use joyful greetings. As I said earlier, everyone you pass, whether it's in the corridor or on the street, little smile and a hello, or it's a beautiful day. And if you stop for any greater length of time, I come from a country where the standard greeting is "G'day, how are you?" And the standard response is "not bad" or "not too bad." Now, it's the same for the Austrians. It's the same for the French. They all have this "not bad" or "not too bad." So I always say to Australians, get rid of the "how are you" and replace it with "what's been the best thing in your day." And 80% of your conversations will start with the other person sharing something that's good for them. Number 2, I asked the head of leadership at Harvard, Bill George, what makes him optimistic. He said, being surrounded by positive people. What a blessing. So like you have done for us today, Andrew, if you can choose the people you're going to spend your time with, choose the optimists, choose the joyful people, choose the positive people. 3, focus on beauty and color. If you see a rose or a piece of lavender, or as Rob and his partner do, someone wearing a beautiful scarf or a beautiful tie or something gorgeous, compliment them on it. And then the last one is be thankful. And that's not just keeping gratitude journals and by the side of your bed for yourself. You have a decent cup of coffee. someone does something for you that makes you feel good, thank them straight away. And if you don't think about it later, like last night, I drove someone home from our board meeting and we drove through the Jewish part of Melbourne. And so I stopped at 2 delis on the way home to buy chopped liver, Russian salad, smoked mackerel, palomini. So I sent her an SMS at the end of the day to say, thanks for letting me drive you home. The food forage on the way home from there was absolutely stunning. So thank everyone as often as you can.
What do you think, Paula?
I love it. I love it. Love it. I will add to that. I will take the joy ball here. So one, our brains are designed to avoid discomfort, conserve energy, and seek pleasure. And we're talking here today about how do you find yourself to seek these moments of joy and pleasure more often. And I would say if we can recognize for ourselves like how we're thinking and feeling, even if it's not always positive, that's okay. Like we can't always be, Victor, I would love to be as optimistic like that all the time. And I do my best. But in order to get there, I think it's important to acknowledge where we are right now, because there is a lot happening in the world and everyone has their own circumstances and everyone's brain works a little bit differently, and maybe a little bit easier for me to get myself into a more joyful state more often, because I have built my life, especially recently, in practicing that. So I do think it's a practice, and doing it on purpose with intention. So acknowledging that you may not always be feeling joy, that's okay. And understanding how you can help reframe things for yourself, look at things a little differently, have a new approach to things to help you get at least maybe closer to joy. It may not be elation, but something that is closer to that more positive way of thinking and feeling. And part of that is knowing your limits. I work with a number of people, I'm sure you know people like this, who really commit to too much. They're doing so much and they may not understand or have a good grasp of where their boundaries are. So setting up a good boundary for yourself and maybe asking your friends, getting some feedback, touching base with people to say, does it seem like I'm taking on a little too much here? Because I may not really need to be doing that. So having a good connection with yourself about if you're taking on too much, so that, again, you can put some of that aside and open yourself up to more spaciousness to allow more joy in. And then we've kind of touched on it here, is when you see those moments that are positive and pleasurable for yourself, amplify them. Right? Like really take that extra second for the hug, or that extra second to look into someone's eyes, or, imagine the flower with the hummingbird like Rob is talking about. And there are textures and colors and all kinds of tactile ways that we can experience joy, or even the sounds, like the sounds around us can be so joyful too. So dive in and allow it one extra moment when you see something or hear or feel something pleasurable.
Apparently, I've gone very joyful and have ended up in a forest. So, I apologize.
Where are you, Andrew?
He's forest bathing right now.
At least it looks green.
Forest bathing.
Yeah, there's your color, Victor.
Yeah.
Nature is joy. Nature is joy.
Nature is
joy. So beautifully said, Paula. I mean, self-care gets overlooked so much in the messaging that I see in society. And I'm constantly reminding myself and reminding others that, yes, when the overwhelm comes up, that is the messenger to tell you, hey, it's time to stop and look after you. And that is perfectly okay. Like one of my favorite sayings I learned early on was, take care of yourself so you can take care of others. Like, you are the priority, because if you allow yourself to be overtaken and overwhelmed and burnt out, you have nothing to offer anyone else. So that's beautiful. And absolutely, we are sensory creatures. So when the good times come, bathe in the good times. You know, my husband and I are so, we love to celebrate. So if something good happens in the day, we have these, you know, this ritual that we do to celebrate it, because what we focus on expands. And so, you know, like you talked about as well, Victor, enjoy the good things when they come and spend time reveling in them. And you know, so 3 things that I wanted to offer are acceptance, expression, and wisdom. So for me, emotional well-being, emotions are so powerful. And for a lot of my life, I was told that I was being too emotional. And so I did my best to shut those emotions down with drugs and alcohol, with distractions of all kind. And what has come to me now, after working through all of that, is to accept that my emotions are part of me and that they actually have my well-being at their core. I mean, anger is nature's way of motivating us. It is the alarm bell to tell us when something isn't right, when we need to make a change. It gives us the juice to make the change. Fear is keeping us alive. We need fear. It's not a bad thing. It's not bad to be afraid. It's not bad to be sad. I mean, sadness is a way of asking for help, because as tribal creatures, when something went wrong and we were feeling sad, the way our body reacts is people would see that we're sad and they would help us. It's an asking for help. So accepting that the emotions are part of you, and seeing the separation, that I feel angry rather than I am angry, because you are an infinite being. You are not your anger. And so what the next step is to express these emotions. Like, emotions are energy in motion. And so they have a purpose, and we need to experience them and express them. So, you know, when you have anger, give yourself permission to feel the anger, you know, take safe time and space to experience it for yourself. So, you know, give yourself time to journal, give yourself time for, you know, exercise or some physical movement that helps get the anger out of you. You know, writing a letter to the person that you're angry about, just to let it out. We've heard that beautiful exercise of, you get an email and you go through the roof because, oh my God, how dare they? Well, write the email saying all of those things that want to come out of you, and that will clear away the anger. So then the clarity comes up, and then you can write a new email and you can be brilliant and eloquent because now you're calm. So you want to accept the emotions you have. You're not wrong for having them. They're here to serve you. Express them in a safe way, and then notice the wisdom that comes after you've gone through the emotion. What do you think about that, Rob?
All of those. And I'm observing there's some themes that are emerging that I think are part of in all of ours and in mine as well. And I loved what you said, Heidi, about, you know, the full range of emotions. Like, we have them for a reason, and it's about understanding. And, you know, fear isn't necessarily a bad thing. But it's understanding what's causing the fear and where it's coming from. Or sadness. Like, we have reasons to be sad, and that's not a bad thing. We should mourn and grieve or be upset about something. It's when you carry it for too long that it can be, and I think it's extremes. Too much joy, this might be blasphemous on this group, but joy might be a detriment ultimately for some people. I don't think for Victor, but as our eternal positive radical optimist, but too much joy could also be bad. And so it's understanding yourself and understanding, where you are and what's causing it, and what you need to do to get back to whatever feels like equilibrium. So, I loved that bathing in the good times, and what we focus on does expand. And it's very true. If they say if you have the scarcity mindset and focus, well, what are you going to end up having? Scarcity or poverty, if that's your mindset and your focus. So instead, think abundance and go in a different direction. So the tips that I have, the first one, and it is related to what Paula, Heidi, and Victor have been saying, is about that self-empathy that I mentioned earlier, like understanding yourself and where you're coming from and what might be behind the feelings that you've got. And Heidi, thank you for sharing, how you were managing some of your emotions through different means as you were gaining your wisdom in your life. It's really important to understand that. And sometimes we can't in the moment, but we can take the time to reflect on where we've been and what might be causing something. And even to what I was saying when we started about understanding, there was a time, it was around 2000. And I noticed it was around this time of year, I noticed as September was setting in, I just started to feel blue and I'd feel down. And I like, what is this? Why is this going on? And it happened a couple of years in a row. And finally, so you started hearing about, and I uncovered seasonal affective disorder. And it was like, oh, okay. And so I talked to my doctor about it and was able to, I think I was taking some melatonin to help with the adjustment at that time. But it was having that awareness of what was going on with myself so that I knew what I needed to do, whether it was to bathe in something or take action, seek further help or guidance. The other tip I've got is to take a curious breath. And I talk about this a lot in my keynotes and other content. Taking a curious breath is that pause. So neuroscientists will tell you there is a gap between stimulus and response, and it can be really, really tight. But to actually take a breath to make space so that you can understand what's going on, what's causing that feeling, and you can make a choice on how to respond rather than just react to something. And that same thing happens with, what you're feeling, when you're feeling it, well, what's causing that? And then how do I want to respond to this? How do I want to move that energy of those emotions through me, maybe to get to a different place, maybe to actually find some joy? The third one is to advocate for yourself. There is nobody that understands you better than you, and it is up to each one of us to advocate for ourselves. And whether it's seeking help, making the change, setting our boundaries, taking the break that we need. I think we're all inclined to carry more water than we really should be, or that our backs can handle. And we need to let some of that out and set those boundaries. But you have to do that for yourself. So it is so important to advocate for yourself. And then finally, the other one that was coming up for me while we were talking was just to practice moving into joy. It's practice the things that Victor and Paula were talking about. Like, what are the things for each one of us that can make us happy? Like, I know if I'm in a certain mood and I need to feel joy, if I'm feeling stressed out, I can go watch like Bridesmaids, for example, and it will have me laughing and it will move me up, and the serotonin will come out and it'll move me into a space of joy. Or I can go take a walk, or I can play with my cats, whatever that specific thing is. Or even that greeting that I think, Victor, you had talked about, and Paula, you were acknowledging as well. Practice in the mirror, like that smile, in imagining. I think Maya Angelou had talked about the greeting that you want to give kids, that so that they feel like they are the most important person in the world when they walk into the room. And so here's a trick. When you're taking a photo of somebody, and they'll like give you a smile and then say, now think about the time that we first met, or think about that moment you met your partner, and pay attention to the way their face changes and their eyes light up. And then how do you get that for yourself when you're about to greet somebody? So whether you're giving that big hug that Paula was talking about, or you're doing a hug with your eyes, how do you bring your eyes to that place? And for myself, that was practice in the mirror growing up, and then trying it in real life and seeing, what do people positively respond to, and wow, that felt good. Let's keep going with it. So self-empathy, a curious breath, advocating for yourself, and practice.
Wow. I think we got more than 12 tips in there. So everybody has more than loaded with tips and tricks and things they can activate. That activation word is so super important. And that brings us into a beautiful segue to a question we got from Jessie a little bit earlier about, well, what about someone who yes, acknowledges the importance of prioritizing their well-being and yes, prioritizing self-care, but believes they lack the time in their hectic schedule to do so? Heidi, up for you to tackle that one first, because you talked a lot about self-care today.
Yeah, well, it's make time. You're worth it. And as Rob just said, you are the only one that can advocate for yourself. And don't buy into the messages from society that you have to be this, a super achiever, that you have to do everything. You are the most important being in your life. And when you care for yourself, that's when you have the energy and the time to do everything that you need to do. And when you are focusing on caring for yourself, and again, as Rob was saying, it takes practice. It takes practice. Just start setting time aside every day. Every day, make time for yourself to do things that bring you joy, that nourish you, and expand that over time with the intention that you deserve it. You deserve to have everything. You deserve to feel good and to have joy and to experience well-being. It's up to you, Jessie. You're the only one that can take care of it.
Can I add a little bit to that may or may not, that may help maybe? I am all about what you just said, Heidi. Totally, 100%. It's all up to us individually to be our own advocates and responsible for ourselves. One thing you might want to do as a practical tip is take that time that you want to make for that and put it on your calendar first. Don't put your meetings on your calendar first. Don't put all that stuff that everybody else wants from you. Find a time that you can put yourself on your calendar and stay committed to that. And watch what happens to your brain when you see other things wanting to take that time over. And just make sure that you have your own back on your own calendar that way. And the other second thing I'll offer briefly is it doesn't have to take a lot of time. It actually can be in the moments, like we were saying. It could just be that extra longer pause and shaking someone's hand or looking at someone in the eye even. So those are the two things I would add to that time factor.
Thank you, Paula. What I want to throw out also, Jessie, is this is an opportunity to ask for help. If there is too much on your plate, it is time to find someone else to help you with it. And, when I start to get overwhelmed and I start to feel resentful about things that I have to do, I know that I need to ask for help. And, I'm fortunate, I'm married, so I can say to my husband, can you do this for me? And he will tell me yes or no. And most of the time it's yes. And it's like, oh my God, what a relief. I don't have to do everything.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I was talking to somebody on a podcast yesterday, Lauren Fritsch, who's going to be a superpower expert for us on the power of finding joy in dark times. And one of the things she said, which fascinated me, was to spend a moment reflecting on what is the emotional benefit you're getting from not doing the thing that brings you joy. Right. So if you said, yes, my emotional well-being brings me joy, but you're not doing it, there's a reason for that. And for you to actually do that self-reflection to understand what you're actually getting more pleasure from by not doing that. And it might be some sort of pleasure of fear, almost of not being able to be the victim in this case, right? Of saying that, oh, I didn't have time. Everybody's putting pressure on my time. And that's actually giving you a psychological boost in a way to be able to play that role and to get that get out of jail free card, as it were. So it's a bit of brutal honesty with yourself of what are you putting off? What are you procrastinating about maybe by spending that extra hour on social media?
Yeah. Like, what is that thing that you're actually indulging in that is not helping you move in the direction that you want to be going? Yeah.
Andrew, have you got your camera on? I can't see you. And
No, unfortunately, my camera has decided that my face is no longer joyful. So you're going to have to just deal with my joyful
we disagree
voice.
with your camera.
Unfortunately,
like the
my
Wizard
camera
of
wins
Oz.
this one. Absolutely. But we're at the end of the hour. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to invite everybody who's still on the call. A lot of people have dropped off due to work commitments and other commitments, talking about time pressure. I'm going to promote them all to panelists so they can join if they want to join and share their thoughts. But in the meantime, Victor and Rob, I don't know if you have any thoughts to add on what Heidi, Paula, and myself have just been talking about.
Yeah, in the late 90s, I met a lady who was the head of the Brahma Kumaris. The Brahma Kumaris are the largest women-led religious sect in the world. They're Hindu. And she actually died last year at the age of 103, and she'd been working until she was 102. And she said to me, when you look at time management and someone asks you to do something, will it bring you great joy? And that was the word she used, joy, Andrew. If so, and you've got time, do it. Number two, is it something that will advance you or the organization? And you can do it, do it. Is it something you must do? And all of us have things we must do. That answers itself. Everything else is a waste of time. And she would, of course, advocate meditation or yoga. And then she did the ultimate test. And she said, and then when you're looking at your diary for the day ahead or the week ahead, just imagine God's looking over your shoulder and saying, God, is that thing you've put in there a waste of time? And I reckon that's just a lovely test, that notion that God's looking over your shoulder and saying, why are you doing that? I found that very beneficial. I still do. I still have this instinct to say yes too often. One of my friends says what she loves about me is I always say yes. But I think now that I've almost hit 65, I've learned to say, apply that test a little bit more.
And remember that every time you say no gives you the opportunity to say yes to something else. And so there's an important relationship between yes and no.
There is. And yet we're so conditioned to say yes and not to say no. And then you're having to do it for yourself. And so many people don't want to advocate for themselves, which gets back into the other things we were talking about. I think the only other piece I would add, I think is all awesome guidance and thoughts. It is what's the risk if you don't? Because I get asked a variation of this question a lot about, like, I'm too busy to have empathy at work. And it's like, well, really? Like, what's happening if you don't do that? What's the the outcome. Or put yourself in the shoes of maybe you're having coffee with a good friend and they say, wow, I really need to take care of myself. I need to do something about my emotional well-being, but I'm just too busy. What's your response to that? And put yourself, like, flip that around so you're almost looking at it from the outside, and think about, like, what guidance would you be giving to yourself in this other avatar, so to speak, because you are so important. And you know, I've seen, and Paula, you've probably seen this as well as market researchers, the people that have sacrificed themselves, whether it's for their kids or their job or their other thing, and they lose their own identity. And that's kind of the path that might lead to ultimately. And so you need to prioritize yourself and hold on to it, so that you can be better at those other things. You know, it's the nurture your, I mean, it's the safety announcement on the airplanes, put the air mask on yourself before helping other people, so that you can help other people, because otherwise you're going to be unconscious. And that might not be a good outcome. So can you afford not to? What guidance would you give to somebody else about the same thing? And again, advocate for yourself and take care. You have to take care of yourself first so you can help others.
I love it. I love it. I would add, and this phrase, act like a drug dealer, but act like a drug dealer for yourself, right? Take the attitude that joy is a drug and give yourself microdoses of joy, right? They don't need to be more than a split second here, a split second there, but take another split second to give yourself the understanding of, why did that give me joy? What was the pleasure in that? So don't just look at that bird and say, wow, but take a second to say, well, that really was inspiring, the way its wings moved, or what little thing was awesome, the power of awe, right? So in those micro moments, find awe and feel the energy that that's giving you, right? Feel that little positive energy boost that you're getting in micro doses. And just like a good drug deal, over time, you will become addicted to joy, right? And then you'll start prioritizing, I think, more and more as you find the hits that you're getting from these little things. But start small. Start small and then build up.
Really, Andrew and Debbie's joy cartel is
yes, make joy a 4D experience. So like you say, Andrew, like both Paula and Victor said, you know, really pay attention to these things that are giving you pleasure, so that you're noticing what you see. You're noticing the thoughts that you're having. You're noticing how it feels in your body and the emotions. So really surrendering to all of that.
I love it. I love it. And some of the comments that are coming a lot about this, also giving that feeling to other people in micro doses, but also taking that moment to reflect what you get back from that, right? That, yes, you're giving that person pleasure by that thank you, especially customer service these days. You know, anybody who works in customer service gets a big nod from me for what they're doing, because there's a lot of angry customers out there, a lot of people not understanding. So when you do take a moment to thank them and say you appreciated the service they gave you, appreciate the way that makes them light up and feel the joy that that gives back to you as well.
And I think, you know, we're in such a the word's going to escape me right now. We're in such a reciprocity, quid pro quo sort of culture, where you're expecting, like, well, if I'm complimenting you, excuse me for that really dramatic lighting that's popped in.
It's beautiful.
If don't just compliment other people, and don't look for or feel like you need to get a compliment back. Because it's really about making that it's the gift that you're giving somebody, and the gift that they're giving back to you is the joy that you created in them. And you know, try to be okay with that, rather than the sort of codependency that we've got, where, well, are they going to say something nice to me? And what if they don't? And what does that mean? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You're going to get yours from somebody else, hopefully. But compliment that person, and then just feel great about the fact that you gave somebody else a moment of joy.
Mm-hmm.
Rob, it's an interesting thing, just having been through some of the small island states, that question of reciprocity. So you look at I've got behind me, I've got the paradise, the flowers in the hair and the friendly greetings, but the complexity in those societies around reciprocity and the need to do that actually becomes a great stress to them. And so, there's always a flip side to an island paradise. And, in our societies, that little bit of reciprocity, but in societies where, that is one of the fundamentals to societal transactions, particularly in a non-cash economy.
Right.
Where half the population are still outside the formal economy, and you're growing your own food and the like and giving it as presents. That reciprocity thing becomes an even greater pressure.
That's a good point that, in different cultures, things work a little differently. We're kind of speaking from, one way of looking at the world, and other people might see it a little differently. So maybe not everything we've shared here today is going to work for everyone, and hopefully people can find, the things that work for them, because ultimately, as Heidi has been saying as well, that well-being is our own personal journey, and we need to be responsible and aware of what works for us individually, whether that's because we're in a certain society or because we have some pressures in our lives, but to figure out what works best for us.
Yeah, and finding the harmony between giving and receiving, because they are both necessary. Mm-hmm. It's not that we're supposed to be giving 100% of the time. Like you said, Rob, you don't have to receive. It's not this reciprocal thing. It's like when you're in touch with yourself, which we've been talking about, the importance of self-awareness. And that happens when you're taking care of yourself and you're taking ownership for your challenges, and you're asking for help. So when you are looking after yourself, you have things to give, and allowing yourself to receive when people want to give to you, because that's another thing. Another of the messages I heard for a long time is that I have to do everything by myself. Well, I don't have to do everything by myself. People want to help me. And I had to practice, like you were saying, Rob, I had to practice letting people help me, to say yes when someone wants to give me a gift, to accept a compliment, just to receive it, to practice that opening up to kindness, that, and then allowing myself to bathe in the kindness that other people are giving me. Mm-hmm. And when I am giving kindness to others, to allow their joy, to experience their joy and be open to it. And it's this beautiful harmony that happens, right? When we are connecting with other people, because we're not meant to do everything alone. And this is, with this crisis of disconnection in the world, and it all started with, at this time around the COVID and people having to be separated. And it was like, well, how can we still be connected? How can we still be open to each other? Because that's what we're here for. We're here to love and be loved, whatever that looks like for us.
Excellent. Well, I think that's a beautiful way to end today's story. None of our people attending decided they wanted to be a panelist. They're happy to listen to your wonderful thoughts. So we're very grateful to have them with us. But I'm very grateful for everybody, you, for coming and sharing the love today, because you really did, I think, with your thoughts and inspiration, show your love for humanity, show your love for not only the people on the call, but more broadly for the people that you'll serve in your lives. So thank you on behalf of them for everything you're doing. And we're just going to wrap up with one question to the four of you, which is our go-to question of what brings you joy. So we'll start with Victor, and Victor can pass that round, and we'll wrap up after these 4 wonderful thoughts on what's bringing us joy, either in general or at the moment. Feel into that.
Andrew, I was already thinking about sending a thank you note to each of you. This has been joyful. I just, looking into the eyes of my fellow panelists and listening to their wisdom, this has been incredibly joyful. So for me, joy in what we've done together. Oh, and I pass it to Rob.
Oh, thanks. Sheesh. I've been on vacation the last couple of weeks, 3 weeks actually, and just came back. So was joy in losing track of time, and having that sort of openness. Like last week I didn't know what day it was, which was a great thing. And then just even this morning, and related to that, I was reading an article, and usually I have this time pressure, but I didn't have a meeting at the top of the hour. And so it was, 7:35 in the morning or whatever. And I'm reading, and I realized, like, oh, I don't have to read fast. I can read to enjoy and take it in and just appreciate what I was reading, rather than like, oh, I got to rush through this to get to the next thing, because I had made space in my day to do that. It's kind of, I think, Paula, you had said, like, put it on your calendar, like make the time to do those things. So those are 2 things that brought me joy. I'm going to pass it to Paula, since I just mentioned her.
Well, I love what you're talking about, which is spaciousness. That's really, really important to me. It's one of my personal values. I guess that's why I bring it up often. But like you, Rob, I actually too was recently on a little mini vacation, and having new places to practice some of these things that we're talking about, where you are really present with a whole new person that you've never met before, and you get to, hear their story. I love basking in other people's really, really interesting, crazy stories. One of my family relatives on my husband's side, collects motocross motorcycles, and he just relishes in optimizing them and finding all the right parts and making sure they're clean and all these things. And I just found it so delightful to hear about other people's passions and how they dive in. And I had the same experience, Rob, where I was not worried about time at all. And really, I was at the Grand Canyon. So it included nature, and it included new people that I hadn't been exposed to before. So those are 2 things that give me a lot of joy recently. How about you, Heidi?
Thank you. Thank you for that, Paula. Yeah, nature is limitless. Nature is a limitless inspiration for joy. And watching the light change on the trees through my window or on my walk, just I am so grateful that I live in a time and place where I feel completely safe, and I get to go out in the world and just, smell the roses and enjoy connection like this. I mean, it is a miracle that we are talking to each other in all the corners of the globe. And so, I just get so thrilled when technology is serving us instead of us serving technology. So, Andrew, thank you so much, both you and Debbie. Thank you for this pursuit and the way that you have created the Art and Science of Joy to spotlight happiness and well-being and positive impact. And so I'll turn now the question to you. Tell us something that brings you joy.
Oh, I thought you were going to do that. So I've just written a great long list of things. No, kidding. Actually, the weather is one thing at the moment. I'm in a place at the moment where there's been some really big storms, and I've enjoyed going out, feeling the rain on my body, and jumping in the puddles. So releasing my inner child is something that brings me great joy at the moment. I think we've all grown up way too quickly, way too old. And I think we could do much worse than all go backwards to remembering when we were young kids and actually had pleasure in just jumping in a muddy puddle. So that's my joy. But Debbie's joined us. So Debbie, you get to close by telling us what brings you joy. There, your final word.
Oh, thank you. This was really fabulous. This is what brings me joy. When we get together and we talk about all the different things that bring us joy. We all come from different walks of life, different places within the planet, all around the globe, as one of you said, with different priorities. And when we get together, I think our joy muscles just keep growing. So I thank you all for being on our panel. I thank all the attendees for joining us and all those who will be listening later, as we had a lot of people sign up for this. And I know many of them are hoping to listen to it when they have a free moment on their own. But this was wonderful. And I hope we continue this story of building more joy in the world.